I'm back again. I think more people should do videos with their battery low. I think it's a good plan. I don't know why more people don't do that. So basically, it's Saturday night and I'm bored. So here I am. Actually, what it is I wanted to practice reading stories. Just to get in the practice of it. I know that I'll be reading even if my voice isn't I don't have a radio voice. I don't have a video face. Whatever. That's neither here nor there. But I do want to practice reading. Maybe so I can get more inflection in my tone. And one of these days, I'm going to do it when I'm not congested with allergies. Today's not that day. But I want to just do like a little bit of reading. And of course I start with something that's untitled, but it's like a really old manuscript, and it's in the file of the Asbalnian Tales. So they're all Avant here and everything. But this is one of the reasons why I really like the Aventure Chronicles, is because of things like this. So, without further ado, untitled essay, I guess? Sure. How should the tale begin? Perhaps, as in all other things, the proper thing to do is to begin at the beginning, or as near as may be possible. This I shall attempt. Few are the writings that have survived through all many changes and troubles of the world since that time, but out of them I have been able to trace much of the history of the lands of the people of the age, as well as the events. What concerns us at present is the long tale of how Amerlin, of whom I shall speak further, held back the great war for long enough to allow the forces of the free peoples to be united. For the history of that struggle, we must delve deep into the unknown depths of time, when mortal men had only just come to the world. The folk who came to be called, in their own tongue, Elfen, the elder folk, lived in peace on their own happy island in the far southern sea. West away from the lands which mortal men should take. When the great evil came from the outside, the forces known as the Lords of Darkness, who hated all things which were not subjected to their will, came to the world. For ages untold, the two races fought for possession of the world. Then, the elder folk, wearied with the constant battle, made a shameful bargain. In return for peace, they directed the Lords of Darkness to the eastern lands, where men had only just begun to wander. However, this bargain displeased the guardians of the world so greatly that they banished the elder folk forever from their fair elder home, until they should pay for the thing that they had done by defeating and casting out the forces of darkness from the world. They struggled long and hard at this, and soon the two groups stood out in the struggle. The forces of the darkness upon the earth, led by the warlock Lord of Vandather, and the free people, nominally led by the Elder King. When the time came for battle, both hosts marched to the famous field of Morana, while individual battles and acts of heroism were done across the land. Endrithan Ducklin returned from a voyage to the Guardians of the World, who promised that the Lords of Darkness should never be able to take an active part in the war. The hosts of light gathered to Morana, while in their rear, Garthel and his small band were overwhelmed by treachery at the hold of Verdok. Thummel of the Three Rings, remembered for his great luck, held the fort of Dwellin Lor, and died leading his band in its defense. However, at Morana itself, things went better. After a 3-day battle, the hosts of darkness were put to flight, and the free people held the field alone. By the flash of a silver blade and bitter spear from the ruin of Red Morana, there came no final victory hoped for, but a victory for a time. For a whole age of the world, for the host of darkness was broken and destroyed, and the warlock lord was dead. However, the elder folk had lost so heavily in the war, and the evil times that had preceded it, that they were no longer a great force in the world, but rather a dying race. Mortal men then began to climb which made them masters of the world. 2 mighty kings of men fought well and valiantly at Morana, Moradin the Fair of the Islanders, and Darkvartha Kadar of the mainland. These 2 made their realms greater in their lifetimes. However, Moradin and his kingdom died in the night of the fire that sank the old island in flame and ruin beneath the southern sea, and sent fugitives from the island fleeing in ships to far lands. Kadar lasted long, and died at the same time as a young man called Connell the Wild was gathering the clans of what had been the descendants of the island fugitives into the kingdom of Asbalnian. Kadar does not concern us too greatly, but it did for briefly become a kingdom again later on, then broke apart into 3 and was joined again, then destroyed by the barbarian Nangs of the desert, and remained as scattered bands of merchants, hunters, farmers, and herdsmen. It is difficult to place the exact date when it was realized that a new warlock had arisen, and that the Lords of Darkness were moving again. Amerlin, it is said, had suspected it all along. From the time of the ending of Morana fight, it is almost certain that he spoke of it to Gwillian Termithian of the elder folk, but they did not tell the rest of the people, partly because they might not be believed, and partly because it would have done little good. They set themselves to watching, and to doing what they could to the hindrance of the Dark One's plans. What shall we say of Emerlin? There's little to be said of him, for there is, and was, little known of him, now or ever. Certain facts are these, for this is all the information he ever gave. He was born by a princess of barbarians, by one of the Lords of Darkness, long ago. His mother's people discovered the truth of his birth and asked aid of the high powers, who answered by removing all control of the Dark Ones from the child, and preventing them from placing one of their own in a high place among men. He was taken by the High Ones and taught much of all arts, then given the task of siding in the long fight. When the Great War came, he wielded a sword and bitterly at Verdok, beside Garthal longsword, and was badly wounded. However, he survived and was able to give some aid at Morana, but his wound kept him from doing as much as he might. He brought warning 3 times to the island of the approaching catastrophe, but 3 times it was unheeded. He did what he could to aid the survivors, and lent aid in secret to the first kings of Asbaln. When the kings of Asbaln were forced to go beyond their borders to keep their land safe, he did what he was able. Later, the extending of the border was not a thing of necessity, but a place for winning the glory by the commanders there. Although he deplored this, there's nothing he could do, for he was still trying to keep his presence known to only a few, and he had no official status. The warlock lord of Vandether, trained by the Dark Ones, saw the use that could be made of the barbarian bands surrounding Asbaln, and sought ever to use them. It is these attempts, and Amerlin's defense against them, that accounts for a good deal of material in this book. These tales that follow are the tales of single men and groups of men who were shown the thing that must be done, and did it, as well as brave as they might. They are not all stories of men who are certain of what they did or why, but the thing that counts is that they did it. These are the strong men, the men of grim faces and strong arms, the men who saw the thing before them and did what they were able. A strong bow, a wind at my back, that does not shift or change. The arrowhead drawn to the knuckle bone, and the warlock lord in range. Marching song of Indrix of the Rods. So that was one piece of it, but yeah, it's that story. That's that little bit. It's supposed to be the introduction, I guess, for their whole entire rest of this, which is a bunch of poems and stories of what's going on in the world of Asbalnian, hence the name Asbalnian Tales. And what I might just do is read a poem or two from there, because there's a whole bunch of like short stories and poems. I plan to do some. I'll be publishing this all later, but I also want to practice speaking, which I just did, and doing some more, but I need to look up at the camera again because I get into the reading, but that's hard because it's just really, there's a lot to that one. I mean, maybe if I read it first and then read over it and looked up, but I just, nope. It takes like a lot of focus and attention, but that's all right. Thank you for listening to that. There'll be more of them later. I mean, eventually I'd like to get back up to reading stories again, but I have a lot on my plate and I simply can't. The only reason why I'm videotaping this right now is because I wanted to do some reading and I wanted to practice anyway. So I decided to videotape myself reading, because why not? There's more stories to read, like more manuscripts to read that aren't this, but I'm going to be doing a lot of the Avantier stuff. Then I think I'll throw up a special introduction when I'm reading Avantier. Not this time, you get a surprise, but when I'm doing Avantier, there'll be a special banner I throw up. So you'll be warned ahead of time. Yeah, but that's all I have for tonight. So I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.